The ice winds howled across the frozen surface of Niveus, a planet where even the strongest metals turned brittle from cold. In an abandoned research station, 12-year-old Xerix pressed her thin body against a heating vent that barely worked. Her translucent skin had taken on a bluish tinge, and she could see her crystalline blood moving slower through her veins. 3 days ago, she had been traveling with her merchant caravan family. They were supposed to pick up rare ice crystals from Niveus. But then the frost fever hit her. First came the shaking, then the blue spots on her skin. The elders took one look at her and shook their heads. "The weak must not burden the strong," they said. "This is our way." Her own mother wouldn't look at her as they left her at the old station. They gave her a thin blanket and 1 day's food. That was all their tradition allowed. Sick children were left behind. It was the Kelvorian way. The food ran out yesterday. The blanket wasn't enough to keep away the bone-deep cold that made her crystalline blood move slower and slower. Xerix knew what happened when Kelvorian blood crystallized completely. She had seen it once, when another child got sick. They turned into beautiful ice statues, frozen forever. She tried to reach the station's control panel again. Her legs shook with each step. The ancient human-built console still had some power. Xerix didn't understand the strange human writing, but she kept pressing buttons, hoping someone would find her. The cold was getting worse. She could see ice patterns forming on her arms where her blood vessels ran close to the skin. They looked like delicate frost flowers, beautiful but deadly. Each breath hurt now, like swallowing tiny ice needles. Xerix curled up next to the heating vent again. She pulled out the small data crystal her younger sister had slipped her before they left. It contained family pictures and her favorite stories. At least she could look at them one last time. The station's lights flickered. Xerix barely noticed when emergency lights started flashing. She was too tired, too cold. Her eyes felt heavy. The data crystal slipped from her numb fingers as she drifted into an icy sleep. Deep in the station's old systems, the emergency beacon finally activated. It sent out a weak signal into space. "Medical emergency. Unknown life form. Critical condition. Please help." The signal bounced between old relay stations, growing weaker. Most ships would never pick it up. Most would ignore such a weak call from a frozen planet where nothing was supposed to live. But somewhere out there, a small medical ship picked up the signal. And its human doctor never ignored a call for help, no matter how small the chance of survival might be. As Xerix slipped deeper into her frozen sleep, she didn't know that help was already on the way. She didn't know that humans were different from her people. She didn't know that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is save someone who others thought was weak. Dr. Sarah Chen was checking medical supplies when her ship's computer beeped. The sound meant a distress signal, but it was so weak she almost missed it. She pushed her dark hair out of her eyes and looked at the screen. "Emergency beacon from Niveus," she read out loud. "That's strange. Nobody lives on that ice ball." But the signal showed life signs. Weak ones, but definitely there. Sarah pulled up the planet's information. Temperature, -100 degrees. Atmosphere, barely breathable. Survival time without special equipment, less than an hour. Her small medical ship, Hope's Dawn, wasn't built for such extreme cold. Computer, how long to reach the signal? 4 hours at maximum speed. Warning, ship systems may freeze at such temperatures. Sarah thought for a moment. Most frontier medics would ignore such a risky call. The chance of finding anyone alive was tiny, but that's not why she became a doctor. "Plot the course," she ordered, "and start warming up the emergency medical pod." As her ship changed direction, Sarah studied the life sign readings. They weren't human. The pattern was all wrong. The blood seemed to be crystallizing, something she'd never seen before. She pulled out her medical books and emergency alien care guides. Nothing matched what she was seeing. This would be like performing surgery in the dark. "Computer, get me everything we have on crystalline biology. And warm up all our blood plasma. We might need it." The next 4 hours were the longest of Sarah's life. She prepared every piece of medical equipment she had, not knowing what she'd need. The life signs kept getting weaker. Her ship shook as it entered Nivius's atmosphere. Ice formed on the windows immediately. The landing gear creaked from the cold as she sat down near the old research station. Sarah put on her thermal suit. It would give her 30 minutes before the cold got too much. She grabbed her medical kit and emergency heaters. "This is crazy," she muttered, checking her oxygen mask. "But I'm not letting anyone die out here alone." The station door was frozen shut. She had to use a laser cutter to get in. Inside, Xerix woke to warmth. Real warmth, not the weak heat from the old vent. Her eyes opened slowly, and she saw something that made her freeze in terror. A creature in a bulky suit was touching her with strange devices. She tried to move away, but her body felt too heavy. The ice patterns in her blood had spread everywhere. Even breathing hurt. The creature, she now realized it must be a human, made soft sounds. The voice was gentle, even though Xerix couldn't understand the words. The human held up a small machine that glowed with colored lights. "Scanner," the human said, pointing to it. "Help." She touched her own chest. "Doctor." "Sarah." Xerix had heard stories about humans. Some said they were dangerous. Others said they were foolishly kind, helping even their enemies. But no one had mentioned how warm they were. The human, Sarah, was wrapping her in something that gave off blessed heat. The scanner kept making soft beeping sounds as it moved over Xerix's skin. Sarah's face looked worried behind her clear mask. She kept checking the scanner, shaking her head. Then she pulled out another device. This one projected pictures in the air. The pictures showed blood. Normal blood, then blood with crystals, then blood flowing normally again. Sarah pointed to each image, then to Xerix's arm where the ice patterns were spreading. Xerix understood. The human wanted to fix her blood, but could she trust this stranger? Her own people had left her to die. Why would a human help? Then Sarah did something unexpected. She took off her outer glove, exposing her hand to the deadly cold. She gently touched Xerix's forehead. The human's hand was so warm it almost burned. Xerix gasped. She could feel her blood moving faster just from that touch. Without thinking, she reached for Sarah's hand, pressing it against her cheek where the ice patterns were worst. Sarah smiled behind her mask. She said something else, then pointed to her ship visible through the station's window. She made walking motions with her fingers. Xerix nodded. She didn't understand the words, but she understood kindness. When Sarah carefully picked her up, Xerix didn't struggle. The human's body heat seeped through the suit, fighting back the killing cold. As they moved toward the ship, Xerix saw her data crystal on the floor. She pointed weakly. Sarah understood immediately, scooping up the crystal and tucking it safely away. That small act of understanding meant everything. Xerix closed her eyes and held tight to her rescuer. For the first time in days, she felt something stronger than the cold. She felt hope. Inside the medical ship, Sarah worked frantically. Her scanner showed Xerix's crystalline blood was still freezing, even in the warm cabin. The ice patterns had reached the girl's heart. "Come on, think," Sarah muttered, studying the medical readings. Normal treatments weren't working. The warming blankets and heated oxygen only slowed the freezing. They didn't stop it. Xerix lay on the medical bed, her translucent skin showing every frozen blood vessel. She watched Sarah with tired eyes. The human doctor hadn't stopped moving since bringing her aboard, trying different medicines and treatments. Sarah took another blood sample. Under the microscope, she saw something amazing. The blood crystals weren't just ice, they were alive. They grew like tiny geometric plants, beautiful but deadly. That's why warming isn't enough, Sarah realized. We need to stop the crystal growth itself. She tried anti-freezing compounds. They didn't work. She tested mineral solutions. They made things worse. Time was running out. Xerix's breathing got slower. The ice patterns reached her throat. Sarah grabbed her own arm in frustration, then stopped. She felt her warm blood pumping under her skin and had an idea. Human blood had special proteins that prevented freezing. Maybe they could help Xerix too. But using human blood on an alien was incredibly dangerous. It could save her or kill her instantly. Sarah ran tests on small blood samples. Mixed together, human and Kelvorian blood fought each other. But when she added certain proteins from her blood to Xerix, something changed. The crystals stopped growing. Found it. Sarah almost shouted. She quickly prepared the treatment, extracting just the needed proteins from her own blood. But Xerix had gotten worse. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing barely visible. The ice patterns covered most of her body. Sarah had one chance to get this right. She programmed the medical pod to deliver the treatment slowly. Too fast could shock Xerix's system. Too slow wouldn't save her. Sarah held the alien girl's cold hand as the treatment began. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You fought so hard. Don't give up now." For one terrible minute, nothing happened. Then Sarah saw it. A single ice pattern starting to fade. Then another. And another. Xerix squeezed her hand weakly. Her eyes opened just a little. Sarah smiled through tears of relief. They weren't safe yet. The treatment would take hours, and anything could still go wrong. But Sarah had found a way. And she would stay right there, holding that small hand, until Xerix was completely healthy again. Sometimes the biggest victories started with the smallest signs of hope. Sarah prepared the final treatment with shaking hands. The modified human plasma glowed softly blue in its container. She had tested it dozens of times. But this was different. This was Xerix's last chance. The young alien watched her with tired eyes. Over the past few hours, they had developed their own way of communicating. Xerix would draw pictures on a tablet, showing Sarah her memories of home, her family, and how she got sick. "This might feel strange," Sarah said, connecting the plasma container to the medical pod. "But I promise it will help." Xerix nodded bravely. She trusted this human now, even though she couldn't understand the words. Sarah had stayed awake for 2 days straight, fighting to save her life. No one had ever fought for her like that before. The blue plasma started flowing through the tubes. As it entered Xerix's body, she gasped. It felt like liquid warmth spreading through her frozen blood. Sarah watched the monitors carefully. This was the dangerous part. If Xerix's body rejected the treatment, there would be nothing else she could do. The ice patterns in Xerix's blood vessels started to glow. Her whole body lit up like a beautiful blue constellation. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Xerix grabbed the tablet with trembling hands. She drew a picture of herself, adding light lines coming from her body. Then she drew a smile on her face. "It doesn't hurt?" Sarah asked, pointing to the drawing. Xerix shook her head. She added another drawing, a simple heart shape next to a figure that looked like Sarah. Tears formed in Sarah's eyes. She held Xerix's hand as the treatment continued. The monitors showed the crystal formation in Xerix's blood slowing down, then stopping completely. Hour by hour, the ice patterns faded. Xerix's natural color returned, a soft lavender shade that Sarah hadn't seen before. Her breathing became stronger. When the last drop of plasma was used, Sarah ran a final scan. She laughed with joy at the results. Xerix's blood was flowing normally again. The frost fever was gone. Xerix drew one more picture, herself standing up, with Sarah beside her. Then she wrote something in shaky human letters she had copied from the medical equipment. "Thank you." Sarah hugged her gently, careful of the medical sensors still attached. Sometimes the strongest medicine wasn't in any container or medical book. Sometimes it was simply refusing to give up on someone who needed help. The next few days brought many firsts. Xerix took her first steps since the treatment, wobbling like a newborn but determined to walk. Sarah stayed close, ready to catch her if she fell. Each day, they learned more about each other. Sarah taught Xerix simple English words, starting with hungry, tired, and pain. Xerix taught Sarah to understand the melodic chirps and clicks of her native language. Food, Sarah would say, holding up a nutrition pack. Krulta, Xerix would respond, then carefully repeat, food. Sarah's neural translator worked overtime, learning the patterns of Kelvorian speech. Sometimes it made funny mistakes. When Xerix tried to say she liked the warm blankets, the translator said she wanted to marry them. They both laughed for hours about that. Xerix discovered human music through Sarah's data files. She loved the way it felt different from Kelvorian songs. Human music had something called bass that made her whole body vibrate pleasantly. Sarah learned that Kelvorians could change their skin color slightly when happy, showing soft patterns of light. The first time Xerix felt well enough to do this, the patterns looked like starlight under her skin. They had serious moments too. Xerix showed Sarah her data crystal, explaining through pictures how her little sister had secretly given it to her. She drew her family's faces, then crossed them out with tears in her eyes. Sarah held her as she cried. She didn't need the translator to understand grief, but she also showed Xerix pictures of Earth orphans who found new families, trying to give her hope. The breakthrough came when the neural translator finally clicked. Suddenly, they could really talk. Why did you save me? Xerix asked in her musical language. Your people don't know mine. Because you needed help, Sarah answered simply. That's what humans do. My people say the sick make the group weak. Humans think differently. We believe helping each other makes everyone stronger. Xerix thought about this. I like human thinking better. Sarah smiled. Me too. That night, Xerix asked to see Earth in the ship's star maps. As the blue planet spun on the screen, she made a decision. She didn't want to go back to her people. She wanted to learn more about these humans who fought so hard to save strangers. Sarah watched her studying the map and made a decision too. She wouldn't let anyone hurt this child again, not even her own people. The warning came during breakfast. Sarah's ship detected a large vessel entering orbit around Nivius. Xerix recognized the energy signature, Kelvorian. They found me, she whispered, her skin turning pale with fear. Sarah checked the readings. It's a search vessel, but why come back after abandoning you? The answer came in a harsh transmission. Human vessel, this is Elder Commander Vex. You have taken one marked for release. Return her immediately. Sarah's translator handled the Kelvorian words perfectly now. She hit the response button. This is Dr. Sarah Chen. I found an abandoned child and treated her. She stays under my protection. The sick child was released according to our laws. The elder's voice crackled. She belongs to the stars now. She belongs to life, Sarah answered firmly. I've cured her frost fever. She's healthy now. There was a long pause. Then, impossible. The freezing cannot be reversed. Human medicine found a way. Come see for yourself. The Kelvorians sent a shuttle down. 3 tall figures in ceremonial robes emerged. Sarah stood at her ship's door with Xerix behind her, one hand protectively on the girl's shoulder. The elder's eyes widened at seeing Xerix healthy. Her skin glowed with its natural lavender color, showing she was fully recovered. This violates our most sacred laws, the lead elder said. The weak must be released so the strong survive. Your laws are wrong, Sarah replied calmly. Xerix isn't weak. She survived something that would kill most people, and I won't let you hurt her. You dare question traditions older than your species? Yes, because age doesn't make something right. The elders moved forward. Sarah stepped fully in front of Xerix. Think carefully, she warned. Harming a human doctor is an act of war. Is your tradition worth that? The elders stopped. They hadn't expected such fierce resistance from a single human. The child must face judgment, they insisted. Then I'll face it with her, and I'll bring evidence of your abandonment practices to every human colony and station. Is that what you want? The elders hesitated. Their species had just started trading with humans. A scandal like this could ruin everything. You play a dangerous game, human doctor, the lead elder said softly. No games, just saving lives. That's what humans do. Behind her, Xerix stood straighter. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the elders. She had something they didn't understand: a human's protection. News traveled fast in space. Sarah's emergency broadcast reached every human medical ship within 50 light years. The message was simple: child in danger. Kelvorians attempting forced removal. Need witnesses. The response surprised even Sarah. Within hours, 5 medical ships arrived at Nivius. Then 10 more. Each carried doctors who had sworn to protect all life, no matter its form. The Kelvorian search vessel suddenly found itself surrounded by small human ships. None were warships, but each carried something more powerful: human determination. "This is Dr. Mayapodal of the medical ship Mercy," came the first transmission. "We stand with Dr. Chen. Dr. James Wilson, Hope's Light, standing by. Dr. Lai Wei, Healing Hand, ready to help." More voices joined in. The Kelvorian ship's sensors lit up as human vessels took defensive positions around Sarah's ship. Inside the search vessel, the elders watched in confusion. "Why do they protect one sick child?" asked a junior elder. "It makes no sense." "Humans are strange," the lead elder replied. "They'd value even the weakest life." On Sarah's ship, Xerix watched the sensor display with wide eyes. "All these ships came for me." "They came because it's right," Sarah explained. "Every human doctor promises to protect life. We take that promise seriously." The Kelvorian commander's voice crackled over the comm. "You cannot challenge our laws with this display." Dr. Paddle responded first. "We're not challenging your laws. We're showing you a better way. Look at your records. How many children have you lost to tradition?" "The strong survive," the commander insisted. "No," came Dr. Wilson's voice. "The strong protect. That's true strength." More human ships arrived. Some carried medical researchers, eager to study Sarah's breakthrough treatment. Others brought representatives from human colonies, ready to offer sanctuary. The Kelvorian ship backed away slowly. They hadn't expected this unified response. One small rescue had turned into a statement that humans couldn't be ignored. Sarah held Xerix's hand as they watched the Kelvorian ship retreat. "See," she said softly. "Sometimes the strongest force isn't weapons or laws. It's people standing together for what's right." Xerix's skin glowed with happiness patterns. She had found more than healing among humans. She had found a people who fought for life itself. The Kelvorian search vessel hung back in orbit, watching the gathering of human ships. Inside, young navigator Kira couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen. The sick child, Xerix, was alive and healthy. It went against everything she'd been taught. "Elder," she finally spoke up during a meeting. "If humans can cure the freezing, why do we still abandon our children?" The elder turned sharply. "You question the ancient ways. I question letting children die when they could live." Kira's voice shook, but she continued. "Look at the medical scans. The human doctor did something we thought impossible." Other young crew members nodded. They had all lost siblings or friends to the abandonment tradition. Each remembered the pain of watching loved ones released to the stars. "The old ways keep us strong," the elder insisted. "No," said Kira. "They keep us afraid. Afraid of weakness, afraid of change." She brought up Xerix's medical readings. "This human fought harder for one of our children than we do for our own." The ship's doctor, younger than the elders but respected, stepped forward. "The treatment they used, it's remarkable. Our medical knowledge could advance decades by studying it." More voices joined in. The younger Kelvorians had seen something they couldn't unsee, proof that their traditions were wrong. The lead elder watched his control slipping. These young ones spoke of change as if it were simple, but he saw something in their eyes he hadn't seen before: hope. "The human doctors offer to share their knowledge," Kira pressed. "We could save so many." A junior elder, one who had lost his own child years ago, spoke softly. Perhaps it is time to listen. The lead elder looked out at the human ships. Their strange determination had sparked something dangerous. Questions, and questions, once asked, couldn't be unasked. He made his decision. Contact the human doctor. Tell her we wish to learn. Kira sent the message herself. As she watched Sarah's joyful response, she knew everything was about to change. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't following tradition. It was daring to find a better way. 1 year later, Sarah stood in her new medical center on New Hope Station. The sign above the entrance read, Interspecies Emergency Care. All life is precious. Beside her, Zyrix helped arrange medical supplies, her officially adopted daughter now. The adoption hadn't been easy. It took 3 months of negotiations, but Sarah's determination never wavered. Now Zyrix wore both her Kelvorian family markings and a human medical trainee badge. She was learning to be a doctor, just like her new mother. Dr. Chen called a young Kelvorian nurse. The new patients are here. Sarah smiled as 3 Kelvorian children entered, all showing early signs of frost fever. Their parents looked nervous but hopeful. News of Zyrix's cure had spread far, changing minds one family at a time. Welcome, Zyrix said in her musical language. You're safe here. The children relaxed, seeing one of their own. Their skin patterns showed relief instead of fear. The treatment room held memories of that first desperate cure. Sarah had refined it now, making it safer and easier. But she kept the original equipment as a reminder of what determination could achieve. On the station's main screen, news played silently. Kelvorian Council outlaws child abandonment. The vote had been close, but change had come. Young leaders like Kira, now a medical officer, had fought hard for reform. Sarah's research center had become more than a hospital. It was a symbol of what happened when cultures dared to question old ways. Human and Kelvorian doctors worked side by side, learning from each other. Zyrix touched the data crystal she always wore, her last link to her birth family. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had a new family now, the doctors who fought for life, the patients they saved, and a human mother who never gave up. Ready for rounds? Sarah asked her daughter. Zyrix nodded, her skin glowing with pride. Ready, Mom. Together, they walked into the treatment room, ready to save more lives. Behind them, the station's windows showed both human and Kelvorian ships docked peacefully together. Sometimes the greatest journeys started with a single act of kindness. Sometimes the strongest traditions were the new ones you built together. And sometimes family wasn't about where you came from, but who stood beside you when it mattered most.